Dr. Adesina, I think one would have to be living under a rock if one wasn't aware of the economic challenges that were going on in your own home country, Nigeria. And I guess if I were to ask you what your recommendations would be to our leaders and policymakers here in Nigeria, we're facing what I call the triple trilemma. From a monetary policy perspective, high interest rates, inflation is soaring. Thankfully, we're not in hyper territory yet. And then, of course, there's the FX rate. And as you alluded to earlier, you see the supply side and the fiscal side as well, which also has its own challenges. How would you advise Nigeria's leaders right now to navigate the current difficult economic terrain?
Well, I always, as a person, I'm not, I don't spend my time criticizing people. I try my best to see what I can do, or working with others to see how we can help. It's not easy to be a president. It's challenging to be a president. And I feel for President Tinubu, with what he has to deal with on the macroeconomic side, with inflation, with depreciation of the currency, but also depletion of the foreign reserves to be able to do that. It's very, very, very difficult. And so I think, my view, and I came here to see him on the 14th of February, is to rally around and support him to succeed. Because his success is actually our collective success. That's very important. And so, but there are a number of things that we've got to be able to do right. When you go to a medical doctor or somebody doing diagnostics, and they ask you to do a scan, you do a scan, and the scan tells you all the things that are wrong, right? So you can either close your eyes and say, I don't want to see the scan, and you live with the problem, right? Or you look at the scan and say, well, this is what the scan says, and what must I do differently? And that's why I always like the song by Michael Jackson, and I apply it to myself. I'm looking at the man in the mirror, and I'm asking him to change his ways. There are a number of things that we've got to change. First and foremost is that in dealing with the fiscal challenge that we currently have today, I think the government certainly will get our own strong support. They are getting our strong support from the African Development Bank. We have a portfolio today of $4.6 billion in Nigeria. And this year, we expect to have a series of portfolio in Nigeria that we're going to finance worth $1.76 billion, which will include, by the way, $1 billion of support that we are designing today for consideration for our board for budget support for Nigeria. And that will help a lot. In
the form of a loan?
Yeah, our loans are the cheapest you can ever find. It's almost like grants.
So concessionary financing.
Extremely concessionary. You pay 1-point-something% on a loan. You pay for 40 years, and you have 10 years moratorium on it.
And of course, the reason I ask is because we often talk about debt sustainability.
Yeah,
yes,
absolutely. But what I'm trying to say is that Nigeria needs a lot more concessional financing, because we are overextended. When I say that we now, I'm putting the Nigerian cap on as a citizen. The country is overextended in terms of Eurobonds and external debt and so on. And as your currency depreciates, it means that the cost of financing your debt externally, it's so high, right? And don't forget, at the same time, you still have a lot of domestic debt that you still have to clean up. So I really believe that the issue is we got to change the amount of money that are inflowing into developing countries like Nigeria and others, I'm talking globally, by making sure that we turn a trend that is not a good trend or a worrying trend. You see, like in 2010, the total amount of external debt for Africa, that in terms of concessional debt, Paris Club debt, was probably about 57% of it was concessional loans. Today it's 24%. But more worrying is the flip inside of the commercial loan and Eurobonds, commercial banks and Eurobonds. It used to be 10% at that time. Today it's 44%. Those are short-term loans done by commercial banks that are also high interest rate. And therefore, the more of the Eurobonds you are issuing in short pieces like that, you have a situation of overlapping payments that you have to constantly keep on making At the same time, your economy is weakening.
Yeah.
So I do think that three things are fundamental as we look at the scan that we're doing. First is mobilize a lot more resources domestically. You know, loans aren't bad, debt aren't bad, but you cannot develop by just depending on debt. You have to mobilize domestic resources domestically and make sure that your royalties and the taxes that all the IOCs and everybody ought to be paying, they are paying it. No free lunch for anybody. You know, you can't be giving freebies when your economy is in that kind of a situation. So that's first thing. I think that will help a lot on the fiscal side. The other is the type of debt. You know, having a greater share of your debt coming from concessional financing as opposed to commercial debt, because commercial debt, you know, it's like something you get today, but you're going to pay for it heavily, shortly, tomorrow. So I think the quality of debt is also important. It's not just taking debt. It's taking debt for what?
Yeah.
And how is that being used? What is the efficiency of the public expenditures for which the debt is being used for? Because you're still going to have to pay for it, right? So that the efficiency argument is very, very important when one looks at the issue of debt. So, you know, I think that for clearly in the case of Nigeria, I know the central bank governor is doing his best, and I really commend them for what they're trying to do on the macroeconomic side to manage inflation.